on something called as firmware. Maybe you guys would be familiar with the word BIOS. So we interact with the OS at the lowest layers. So with that said, the reason behind why we wanted to have this a series of talks in the first place is to genuinely help students, to give them a taste of what people who are working in industry can offer. So none of these content of these sessions, you could probably get it online, but having a mentor will always benefit. That's why we still have colleges, we still have teachers to educate and guide us in a proper way. So now coming to the course schedule itself, like we are thinking of coming up with, we actually planned like 5 sessions, starting with VS Code. And then we are going to have 2 more sessions on Git. And then followed by, we wanted to have a little bit of my own expertise, which is how do you know about OS operating system, and how do you deal with those internals. And then finally, we will end up with the entire series with the miscellaneous selection of tools. So if you look at the agenda, like all the sessions, you could see it's more of a practical exposure of how we actually use some of these knowledge. Again, I'm not saying your textbook knowledge or whatever you're learning within the college is still useful, but having this practical edge will definitely help you. And coming to this session, let me share the screen maybe. And by the way, don't worry about the slides and slide deck and whatnot. So all of this content will be shared on GitHub, just for your reference, because most of the content that I'm providing here is kind of shortcuts driven slightly. So it's always better to have it as a reference, right? So. And this session is more on VS Code, which I believe, luckily I had this poll which I posted yesterday on the WhatsApp group, and looks like at least some of you are already familiar with what VS Code is. But I'll go into the details of how efficient this editor can be, right? So let me just jump into the agenda straight away, because we only have like 1.5 hours, and probably we might not have enough time to go over every detail of the editor, right? So here is the agenda. So if you look at here, just give me a second. So if you look at here, we'll start with what an IDE is and what a text editor is. Many people might be already familiar with this, but I just want to run through that so that we all will have a common pace. Just let me know if you can see the screen and everything is visible. If not, talk to me. I can readjust accordingly. Okay.
Yeah, screen is visible. Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on. So the first agenda here is just to discuss between what an IDE is and what a text editor is. And then I'll briefly talk about how do you install VS Code, and then how do you launch it. And then the third thing is basically I'll show you when you actually go to a computer lab, or for that matter at your home, and you want to write some programs, be it in any language, right? So how do you do that? So this is the basic thing. So if you can just get that third slide, that's all more than what you can, what I'm expecting from you, right? And then once I show that workflow, I'll go into the actual crux of the topic, which is how do you improve your editing skills? Like how do we, when working with large code bases, how do we handle that, navigating the code and things like that? So that's where comes this basic editing navigation tricks, and then followed by the actual editor itself, like what does VS Code offer compared to other editors and things like that. And my most dearest topic is about multiple cursors, which basically changed my way of editing things. If you would have asked me like 10 years ago, I would have edited things in a much different way. But with the advent of multiple cursors, it completely changed the way I edit code and I write text, right? So this is my main emphasis. So just to make sure you guys pay more attention, I just kept these stars here. And then I also, after that, I also follow up the VS Code with a couple of extensions, because VS Code is just an editor, so it cannot provide all the features that one can expect. So the way we achieve that is through extensions, and then followed by, I'll provide you a couple of references where you can go and dig deeper, right? Hope this is clear. Let me straight away jump into the actual meat of the presentation, right? So so this slide talks about what VS Code, what IDE is and what a text editor is. So IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. Again, you don't have to remember that. All you need to remember is, you might be already familiar with these tools: Eclipse, NetBeans, IntelliJ, and Visual Studio. So basically, these are sort of full-blown applications, very heavy applications, which will help you to develop web applications, or graphical user interface applications, or you can basically do end-to-end solutions, end-to-end projects within using those IDEs. You don't have to rely on any of the third-party software, right? So you see some pros here. Like I said, you have IDEs basically come with compilers integrated into it. So if you install Visual Studio or Eclipse, you basically can have you basically usually will have the compilers and associated tools along with it, right? So your process of initiating a project and then completing it is much smoother. But the problem and the downside here is, as it includes a lot of stuff inbuilt, the size of these IDs go around like few GBs. So, and not only that, they cannot actually handle large projects. Like let's first look at how they look like. Like, if you're familiar with Eclipse, the interface itself will talk a lot about what the IDE does, right? Like, you see all these fancy toolbars, all these windows and things like that. So it almost overwhelm a newbie to when he's exploring these sort of tools, right? And then if you see NetBeans, the same story. The UI itself talks a lot about how heavy the editor, the IDE itself is. And then, just for the sake of it, so I also included Visual Studio here, which is also one of the popular IDE where you have end-to-end solutions that can be built. But like I said, it cannot handle large projects. One of the funny fact is, like, I work in Windows division. So the entire source code of Windows runs through almost like 300 to 400 or sometimes 500 GB. So imagine you loading that much of a content into an IDE, right? It's almost impossible. In fact, nobody within Microsoft actually uses Visual Studio to develop Windows. The reason being very simple. None of these IDEs can handle millions and lines of code. So what we generally do is we rely on text editors, because they are lightweight. They only focus on some part of the project. Like, I don't need to edit all these million lines of code at once, right? I focus on my area of interest, right? So I only work on those set of folders. Now IDEs cannot do that. IDEs either work completely or they don't work at all. So that's another disadvantage with IDEs. And not just that, and usually some of these IDEs, not all, but some of these IDEs are paid, and it's not even accessible to students mainly. So I'll keep it there with the IDEs. Let's move on to the editors. Why people, especially students, prefer text editors? 10 years ago, the editors were almost very primitive. We used to have VI and Emacs. Still, people use it. They are really great, but they have their own steep learning curve, right? But luckily, now we have Visual Studio Code, which is again falls into text editor categories, but the size of the editor is like very small, almost like few MBs, right? So the single most important fact about Visual Studio specifically is it can handle large code bases. because all it is doing is opening those files, and it's up to you to edit in whatever way you want to your heart's content, right? So you can basically scale it. The other thing is almost all of these text editors basically have very extensive configuration mechanisms built into it. Like, you can customize it, you can add new features to it, you can change the way it looks and things like that. Basically, it can adapt to whatever environment you are working with. Today, if you are working with Java projects, you can adapt your text editors to Java environment. If you're working in .NET, you can adapt it to .NET, or for that matter, you're working with some ML environment, you can adapt to them, which is almost unheard of in case of IDEs. So I cannot build Java applications in Visual Studio, whereas I cannot build .NET applications in NetBeans, right? So it's very much tied to the ecosystem IDEs, unlike text editors. So that's one big advantage. So you learn a text editor, and you're almost set for your life. So you can just take those knowledge, take those learnings, and adapt it to almost every environment that you move in, right? So that's one big advantage. And of course, all of these text editors that I'm pointing here, Visual Studio Code, VI or Vim, Emacs, all of them are open source and free of cost. So the barrier to enter these or use these editors is almost zero, right? But one downside, like I mentioned, these editors being so lightweight, they do not include compilers or debuggers, or for that matter, any tools with it. So if you want to develop a project, like starting all the way from creation of the project all the way to the end, it's your responsibility to configure the editor such a way that it works with that environment, right? So there is a little bit of configuration needed whenever you're changing the environment, but it's a one-time thing. Once you do that, you're all set, right? So that's another important thing that you have to keep in mind. So that's what I'm calling here. Building end-to-end projects require working with the build system separately. So that's the downside here. But look at the look and feel, right? Like so right now, what I'm showing you here is VI editor. Now, if you look at the interface, it almost has nothing related to UI. Like, you don't see toolbars, you don't see any of the fancy menus or anything like that. The focus here is mainly on editing text. Rather, in this case, it's code, right? So the same applies to Emacs. The focus is on editing text. And then comes VS Code. VS Code is kind of special because it almost blurs the line between text editor and IDE. Even though we call it as a text editor, it sort of blurs the line between IDE and text editor, because it does offer some of the fancy features of IDE, but at the same time, it stays very lean and very small when it comes to the size and the footprint, right? So hope you got a decent understanding of between what an IDE is and what an editor is, right? So one request though is, if you guys are using Notepad or Notepad++, I would genuinely request to stop using it, just because you can get your job done with those, but the efficiency is very low. Like if you do the similar thing with VS Code, or for that matter any text editor, you will have a lot more efficient way of navigating around the code and things like that. And another thing I would like to call out here is Visual Studio is completely different from Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio is basically an IDE, and then Visual Studio Code is a text editor. Just keep that in mind, okay? I'll again, I'm not following the Edgroom the questionnaire, so feel free to stop me at any point in time if there are more questions there. So right now, I'm just showing you how you actually install this editor. So it's very simple. You go to this URL and then download and install it. But one small thing that you have to keep in mind is you just need to check this first one and second option. Not sure if you guys can clearly see these, see the slide, but so basically the third and fourth option will be already selected, but you just have to select the first and the second as well. You will understand why we need that, because there are, this is the only thing that you have to do. Once you install it, then comes basically how do you use it, right? Like how do you even launch the editor, right? So there are two ways. Let me first go over the first way in which you start the editor for the first time, right? So you have let's say you have a folder which I'm calling as programs, probably like you have done your lab exercises or whatever, right? You kept them all in a folder. You can name it any name you want, but let's say you have a folder with the name programs. You can right click it, and then just because we selected these two checkboxes, you can see this context menu entry. So if you do not do that, you won't be able to see this option. So that's why I wanted you guys to check this when installing. So you can click this, at which point basically VS Code will open the entire folder and all of it files, all the files within it in the VS Code. Okay, this is one approach. And the second approach is usually when you go to the command prompt, right? So sometimes what happens is people will be working from command line, be it from the terminal or command prompt, and then you want to open that folder from the command line, right? So that can also be done. You use code. Code is a command that whenever you install VS Code, automatically this command will be available. So you just give code space that folder name, right? So once you do that, what happens is again the same story. The folder programs folder gets opened, and if you see here, I happen to have only one small program, so that's what it is showing here. Okay. There is no personal preference here. Like I myself tend to use both ways. So basically, within Windows, like I said, we don't have IDEs. So what we do is we open terminal, and then we open the source code that we want, like I showed here, and then we edit the code, and then we come back to terminal and we run our build system. That's how we build our component within Windows, right? So other times when I have to just explore the code and things like that, or any text file or anything, or I'm not working in the terminal, right? In that case, I use this approach. Just keep in mind, you can open it in two ways. Let's jump into the next slide, which is absolutely important for you folks, especially when you want to use VS Code in your labs and or at home for that matter, right? So this slide might look complicated, but bear with me. It's not that complicated, but it's an essential step that you have to go through to make it usable for writing your programs. So in the second slide, I did mention VS Code being light. It doesn't come with any compiler or any debugger built into it, right? Like, because VS Code never targets a specific environment, right? It being a text editor, it works with multiple environments, be it writing C programs or Java programs or .NET or Python, whatever, right? So it's your responsibility to set the appropriate compiler for the chosen environment, and then start writing your program. So in this slide, what I'm showing here is basically I'm focusing on C programs, but the workflow almost applies very similar to Java or .NET or Python. So the idea here is you download the compiler. Let's say you want to write some Python programs, right? So you download Python interpreter, and then you install it. You set the path to where the Python interpreter is, and then you keep using VS Code to write code. The same story applies to .NET. You install .NET, and then you set the path, and then you open VS Code, you write .NET program. Similarly to Java, similarly to C. I'm kind of comfortable with C, so I'm just showing it here. So let's go through this slide. So this is the place where this is the link. Again, the slides will be shared on GitHub so that you can it can be easily accessible. So you click this link, which will take you to the executable where you can download C compiler, and then you install it. Once you install it, right, you just go to your start menu and then type UCRT, Universal C Runtime. So once you do that, you get this menu, right, this option. So once you click that, you will have this small terminal opened. Again, you don't have to care what it is. All you have to do is blindly type the command that I highlighted here. That will pull all the very good compilers actually. So those things into your system, right? The third thing is very important, which I think most of you are already familiar with, is basically setting the path, right? This is what I'm talking about. Right now in step 1 and step 2, I showed you how to install C compilers. But if you do Python, you install Python and then come to step 3, and you appropriately set the path to the compiler where Python is installed, or where Java is installed, or where .NET is installed, right? In this case, it being C, that gets installed to C colon slash M664 and so and so path. You just set it, and then once that is done, you're set for C environment. So from now on that specific machine, you all you have to do is just simply open VS Code and start writing your programs. So this is how it will look like. So if you open it, you can write your programs. You can build it here like this, and then you can execute your program. I just gonna show this in practice so that you guys will be very familiar with it. Okay, so hope the screen is visible. Let me maximize it a little bit. Okay, so if you see here, you can find this thing called programs, where I have just one program. So since I am at the terminal, I'm using code and then trying to open it. So this is how it will look like. Let me maximize a bit. Okay, and if you happen to get an editor that look like this, now VS Code also has an inbuilt terminal. So all you have to do is just go here. Just give me a sec. Okay, so just go here and then click this option. I don't know whether you can see this. So I'm just moving my mouse here. So the second option is what you have to click. When I click this, it opens the inbuilt terminal. There is a shortcut for it. I don't want to overwhelm you with too many shortcuts, because we have to learn a lot more in the coming slides. So just click this, you'll have the terminal open here. So here, since I have already set my path to the compiler, you can simply do GCC and then followed by the program. Here in this case, it's a sample. Okay, so I can type sample and then hit enter. Assuming your source code has no issues, you get what is called as a.exe. All you have to do is a and then give it a. Basically, it will complete the name, and then hit enter. Okay, so this is how you do it. Now, as you keep writing programs, what you do is you come to this left side pane, which we call as Explorer. All you have to do is just click this plus button. Okay, if you click this plus button, it will create a new file. Let's say I want to write third.c, right? So you just type it and hit enter. That creates a blank file. For the sake of interest of time, I'm going to just copy the existing code here and then just pasting it here. Let me change a character here. Okay, and then just you simply save it. You come back to the terminal, and then again GCC, give the file name. If everything compiles, you don't see any errors, and then you run the program. Okay, so this is the most basic way in which you can use this editor in your lab environments. So I'll stop here and then just move back to the slide so that we have a lot more to cover. Does the online forum has got any questions, Visu, or can I continue?
Yeah, no, nothing so far. Nothing so far.
Okay. Is my pace okay, or do I have to tone it down, or am I doing good?
It seems to look okay, good for me. But any student, please unmute yourself, and then if you have any. Okay, good. Yeah, good. So yeah, move on. Yeah.
Sure. So this is this slide is
Vineel wants it. I think some student raise a hand. Go ahead. What's his name? Hey, go ahead, Lalita. Yeah, I think maybe hands. Okay, Vinil, let's move on. I think that's maybe thumbs up. Yeah, move on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so this slide is sort of, I'm going to deep dive into what the editor can offer. Up until now, you have seen me opening small folders, right? Like it just has like hardly a couple of files. Now, this is not how VS Code is used in real life, like real industry environments, right? So in order to demonstrate that, uh, I have a project called Vimlib. It's an open source library. And if you look at the statistics of that directory, right, that project, right, it has got like 300 files and 48 directories. Again, according to some of the code that I work with, this is considered very small because 300 files are not big, but still for beginners, this is still a huge number of files. But the interesting thing here is it has got like 48 folders. Like if you look at the right side here, I'm showing the directory structure here. So doc is a folder, examples is a folder, include is a folder. So it has like bunch of subfolders within it. So it's quite complex to navigate the entire directory structure and make some code changes, right? This is where the real power of Visual Studio come into picture. So I'm not going to walk you through this slide. Again, like I said, this will be posted. I have a just a copy of this so that I can refer myself. But I'll straight away jump into the actual editor so that I can walk you through some of the features of the editor, right? Okay, so I did open programs before. Now I'm trying to open Vimlib, right? So code space Vimlib. So if you look at this, let me also open the folder in Explorer, which you are very familiar with already. So if you compare this, like whatever you're seeing on the left is basically the contents that are present on the disk, right? Like whatever you're seeing on the Explorer is what you will be shown on this Explorer as well. So all the files that you're seeing here will be shown here. Okay, so this is the main interface of VS Code, right? This is the starting page. If you look at here, the striking difference, like I said you in the second slide, is this doesn't have any toolbars. You don't find any fancy toolbars eating up your space like 5 lines down the screen, right? The idea is give the developer as much real estate as possible so that he can be more productive in editing text or editing code, right? That's why that metaphor to create a bunch of toolbars and nobody know which icon does what, right? So instead of that, the industry has shifted this trend towards remove all toolbars, but we need a way to find the features of an editor. That's where uh, uh, command palette come into picture, right? The name, let me show you that straight away so that it makes a lot of sense. So if you see, here is the first shortcut that is listed, right? So if I press Control Shift P, right? Uh, just remember this one shortcut because you can basically navigate the entire editor using this. So when I press Control Shift P, it pulls down this small palette of window where you can see a small text bar waiting for you to enter something, and then it will list out all the options that the VS Code can offer you, right? So let me give you a simple example here. I want to change the look and feel of this editor. Usually what you do with normal IDEs or normal editors is you need to fiddle, you need to figure out, or you need to do some Google search or whatever to figure out where the options are and how do you change it. With VS Code, it becomes so much trivial. All you have to do is Control Shift P to bring the command palette and then simply type theme. When you do that, it does filter down all the options, and within those I could see there is a preferences called color theme. If I click that or hit enter, it will bring me all the themes that I have for this specific editor installed right now. So now I can basically navigate between the editors as I move my the cursor. I mean the arrow keys as I hit my arrow keys. So basically, the theme is getting previewed right there itself. Gone are those days where you hit apply and you validate and then you change it and then you hit apply and things like that. You just simply navigate whichever theme works best for you. Some people like lighter themes and some people will like darker themes. Okay, so this is one way in which you can get to it. Now, interestingly, when I'm typing keyboard shortcuts, right, you people are not able to see it, what keys I'm typing. Of course, luckily I haven't typed not many shortcuts up until this point, but there is this option within VS Code called screencast. Again, I don't know the shortcut for it, how to enable it, but I just searched for screen, right? It filtered screencast mode. If I hit enter, from now on, when I press a key, you could see the key being typed there. So I pressed control right now. So that's why you're seeing control here. Okay. So this way, at least you will have some visual view of what I'm actually typing here. If I press Control C, you can see that. Okay. And then let's move on, right? So like I said, this project has got 300 files. And now my next obvious step is to open a file and then edit its text, right? Keep in mind, usually with large projects, nobody will write programs from scratch. Instead, what they do is they have to quickly navigate around the project, navigate around the files, and then be able to process that information, be able to quickly read the code. Right, excuse me. So the next obvious thing is for us to be able to open a specific file, right? So I know a file called vimboot, but I do not know exactly where that file is located within these list of subdirectories. Like I said, this project has got like 48 directories. So I have absolutely no idea where that file is. So the beauty about VS Code is you just have to press the second shortcut, right? If you see here, go to file, it says Control P, right? So if I press Control P, it brings me the a command palette. Of course, the look and feel looks like command palette, but it's a different palette meant for searching files. So now here, if I just type vimboot, it will filter out from all these 305 files, it will filter out from which directories that vimboot is present. It happens to be vimboot.c coming from src and vimboot.h coming from includes/vimlib. So this part is the directory from where this file is coming, and this part is the directory where this particular file is coming, right? So if you want, you could go and expand these files individually, but nobody does that, right? So I just simply hit enter. That's it. So this basically opens the let me increase the zoom here a little bit. Again, my intent is not to make you understand this code. The intent is not that. Just follow me the way I'm showing you the features and adapt it to your own projects. And so the first thing is you navigate around the code. That's one thing. The other thing is this explorer that I showed you. So either sometimes you have to create new files, right? Like you not only read old existing files, but also you have to create new files. All you have to do is click this to create a file and click this to create a directory or a folder, right? So let's say if I have to create a.txt, I click this. If I have to create a folder, I click this. Now, here is an interesting shortcut, which is if you have to create two levels of directories, right? I want to create a directory A. Within it, I want to create a directory B, and within that, I want to create a file called c.txt, right? Usually what we have any novice user does is basically he does click this and creates a directory A, and then go inside it and then clicks the folder button again to create folder B, and within it he goes there and then clicks this button. to create the actual c.txt file. Luckily, VS Code, you don't have to do all those. You just click the file and then look at what I'm doing here. I just have to type a/b/c.txt. So VS Code will automatically create the required folders in between and puts the final file into it. It's a big time saver. So you work with the opened project or opened folder. You create files, you edit files, you navigate around the files. This is the general way in which you spend your time in VS Code. And then this is one small trick that you can apply. And the other important, at least one of the feature which will be very beneficial to you is, let's say you have two XML files, right? Like be it some data files or whatever, right? So these files happen to slightly differ between them. Like there is some line removed or some line modified or whatever. Luckily, VS Code has this inbuilt diffing editor. So if I just click this and then control click this, and then if I right click the both files, you see this compare selected. Watch out what happens. So when I click that, it will bring me this comparison editor where you can clearly see. So left side is the name of the left file will be indicated here, and the name of the right file will be indicated here. Okay, so what you're seeing right now is the line last name, the Bob is modified to Robert. Okay, you can clearly see that. And if you scroll down, you can see a line is completely removed. So you don't see that line here anymore, right? Similarly, a new a line has a character has been added for line 57, right? So if you see this, this is again, it gets used quite often, but on those lines, I want to highlight one thing. Now, if you look at the scroll bar here, right? So if you look at the scroll bar here, it will give you a complete glance of the entire file. It's sort of like a bird's eye view. So there are three modifications, three changes that are done here, right? Three places. You can see, even though this specific view that you're seeing may not show all of them, looking at the sidebar, the scroll bar, you can see, oh, there are three differences, one here, and one here. So there are these small features that make your working so much productive, right? So pay attention to the scroll bar itself. It has got these small tiny helpful features. Okay, so let me jump back to the actual editor, the actual source code file which I opened earlier, just to demonstrate some of the features, right? So every tab has got, when you right click, it has something called as copy path. Quite often you have to know what is a complete path to this file. So if I click copy path, I'll have the actual path to the file. Okay, it becomes very handy when you have to deal with this. Maybe you have to upload this file to some website or something, right? So all you have to do is just copy this path and go to that browser, and you can give it, right? So there are many use cases, but this is one of the single most used feature actually. So that you don't simply go to Explorer and find out where this file is and things like that. Okay, and then there is this. Okay, now one of the important important tradition that is enforced in real software companies is the code that you're editing will follow a style guide. So you cannot write code the way you like, even though it might achieve the end goal. It has to follow certain guidelines. So one of the most famous guideline that is used in many places is 80 column limit. So if you start writing code, make sure your code doesn't go beyond 80 columns. Okay, so the reason for that is it becomes so much hard for a reader, for a person who is reviewing your code, to look around you look around the lines that are going horizontally. In fact, that's why even newspaper has this column format. The newspapers don't use text running across the page, right? They have these columns, so that it becomes so much easier for you to read, right? The same holds true even when you're editing code. So you have to have that 80 column limit. So that's why you see this line here. These are called guides, column guides. So I configured my VS Code to show it at line 80 and also line 100. Okay, you can customize this, but uh, there are ways to set it. So according to your project style guides, we choose these guidelines. Column guides is what we call, right? Again, if you look at this entire file, again, this project follows that 80 column guideline. So you don't hardly you don't see any lines. Maybe a once or twice, very small places, because he cannot bring this line to down. It doesn't look nice, right? So there are slight exceptions here and there, but by and large, we tend to follow that 80 column guideline. So try to enforce this guideline even when you're developing code. The reason why 80 column is very much suitable for C code is more compact when you're writing, because the function names are very small. Whereas when you're using .NET or Java, the function names or the method names are quite big. So 80 column limit is not enforced there. Instead, I believe they follow like 100 column limit. Okay, so that's one thing. And again, the other thing I wanted to call out here is indent guides, right? If you see here, line 87, sorry, 97, if block that you're seeing here and the closing parenthesis that you're see here, right? There is this line which basically gives me a visual clue that, oh, this brace is corresponding to this particular if block. Okay, and this specific line or whatever. So if you look at here, there is a for loop and there is an if block. So you could see this indent guidelines. So they also, again, some people like it and some people don't like it, but I tend to keep it so that it makes my life easy, and it also very helpful when you're formatting code. Now let's look at this. You generally, when you're writing programs, excuse me, you are at a parenthesis, and then sometimes you do not know exactly where the closing parenthesis is. You keep looking for where is the closing parenthesis for that opening brace, right? Luckily, VS Code has got something called as a matching bracket. Again, I know the shortcut, but I don't want to tell you, but instead I'll show you a way in which you can figure that out. So remember the first shortcut to invoke command palette, Control Shift P. Okay, you get this, and brace. Sorry, I think it's matching pair. Go to bracket, sorry. So if I click that bracket thing, look at what happens right now. Before invoking this command palette, the cursor was at line 144. It will straight away jump to line 133 if I click this. Looks like the shortcut is Control Shift \. So the more you keep using it, you don't open this command palette. Instead, you just it becomes muscle memory for you. So you keep hitting that shortcut. But this is the way in which you can learn more about an editor, this particular editor. So let me click this. So it will put the cursor to its closing bracket. It works the other way as well. You can go to the opening bracket as well. So again, when you're writing a decently sized program, this becomes very handy. On the same note, basically, I did show you the scroll bar. Even here, if you see the scroll bar, let me first explain how do you find something within this file, right? So let's say I want to find where this volume underscore name is used, right? This is the name of the variable, and I want to know where this variable is used across this file, right? So obviously the first thing that you do is Control F, right? When you click Control F, you get this since I selected the name, again, this is another thing I just want to call out is never ever do use mouse and drag a word like this, right? It's absolutely waste of time. Instead, what you have to do is just single click it. I mean, just to put the cursor somewhere in the word and just double click it. It's so much faster. Let's say I want to search for this variable, for this entire thing, right? I double click it. So dragging and then selecting mouse is a waste of time. So don't do that. So let's go back. So I want to search for this variable called volume underscore name. I do Control C to copy it and then Control F to open my find dialog. Okay. So if you see here, the moment I do volume underscore name, it did highlight the places where you see volume underscore name, right? I see 4 places here, but looks like the variable did occur more than 4 times. How do I know that? Just by looking at the scroll bar. So if you look at the scroll bar, you see there are a bunch of other orange dots here. What that tells you is this volume underscore name is actually found in many other places. You just have to scroll it down. See, if I scroll it down, you actually can see that here, volume underscore name here, and then volume underscore name here. So scroll bar is so much useful for you to give a glance of what it's basically a bird's eye view of your entire file. So you can just scroll down and see, oh, the variable is also still being used in many other places. So that's how you can quickly see where this variable is getting used. And since we are on the find aspect of the editor, finding things aspect of this editor, let me call out just a couple of options which you have to know, which is these 2 buttons, right? One is matching case, right? So if let's say I have, let me do this. Something like ABCD, something, right? When I do volume underscore name like this as is without checking any of these buttons, what happens is it also matches that volume underscore name within this text as well, which I absolutely do not care because this is not my variable name. I want my variable names to be detected, right? So that's where you try to use this match whole word. When I toggle this, look what happens. It doesn't match this because the whole word, the volume underscore name is not a complete word in this, whereas it's a complete word here. So to keep it simple, always when you're editing code, make sure you toggle this. That way it finds what you're looking for, what your intent is. And the other thing is also try to toggle this so that it exactly matches the case. Sometimes you don't want to match variables with which has capitals in it, right? So you only want to match the exact variable name. So again, keeping it simple, always toggle these 2 buttons and when you are searching it. Okay. And then when you expand this, you have a replace, right? So you can start typing whatever you want to replace it with, and then you can click replace all. So far so good. So there is whatever I'm talking right now is nothing new to you folks. It's just that VS Code has small features that benefits you. Now, up until now, the find dialog that I opened only works for one specific file, not for multiple files, right? So now let me open another file which is called header.c. So I just hit Control P to open the file dialog, and then I'm typing header, and then I'm hitting enter. So I open this file. I don't even care where that file is coming from, which directory it is coming from, right? So here, let's say I want to rename this function, right? This is the name of the function, right? If I have to go change on every file, look for it, and change the name of the function, it will be very tedious, right? So what we do is we invoke search across the project. Earlier we saw invoking search only for the specific file, but here we are invoking it for the entire project. The way we do that is by either hitting this guy, the magnifying glass here. So you click this, it will bring you to this search thing. So just select it and then paste it. It will show you which files are actually using that function across the project. It already searched all the 300 files in a split second, and then it showed me like which files have been using it. If you look at here, vim.h file, which is in include/vimlib directory, is using it. Obviously, header file, which I opened right now, is using it. And vim.c from src folder is also using it. Okay, this will give me a glance of how common function is this across the project, right? So now this is again the other thing is, even here, make sure you check both the case as well as the whole word. That makes your searching more expected rather than seeing any surprises. So this is the way in which you search. Now, just an extension to this is basically how do you replace, right? So you expand this, you have a replace button, a replace text box. So instead of header, I wanted to type HDR. And if you see the output, it immediately changed my output from striking off my original word to the new word. What this is giving me is the visual feedback of what the editor is going to do when I actually hit the replace. So just for fun, if I click replace all, it will show me that there are 3 occurrences which you are going to replace. Should I go ahead or not? Let's say I did replace. So every file, of course, there are only 3 files here, but in every file it goes and then it updates it. Okay, this is, I think, very, very frequently used thing. So as you look at the way I'm showing it, I'm focusing on single file so that you guys get benefited when you're writing simple programs in the labs. But the potential here is like endless. You can basically expand it to the entire project, right? So that's about it. And then sticky scroll, I'll skip that. Yeah, this is another feature that I recommend you guys a lot, which is again, when you're reading a lot of large code bases, right? Like, let's say I'm trying to read this, I'm trying to make sense of what this code is doing. Okay, so I again, you guys don't have to know anything about it. I just want to show you one feature which will really helps you, which is right now I'm at right now I'm at read vim header, and then I'm trying to go to this function, right? I see there is a call to this function called full_read, right? Immediately what you feel is like you want to know what that function is doing, right? You want to read what that code is doing. So what you can do is you just hold control and then click it. Immediately that word will become like a hyperlink. So once you click that, it will automatically take me to the file. It will open the file where this function is implemented, and it puts the cursor right in front of that function. Assuming I have read through the code, if I have to go back where I came from, right? Because we are not yet finished with the previous code, I have to type Alt left arrow. It will put me back to where I came from, right? So again, if I want to once again go into the function, I have to do Alt right arrow. It again puts me to the function here. So the idea here is you start with one function, and then you explore the functions within it, and then you explore the functions inside it, so that you navigate functions within functions within functions, and then you backtrack to where you started. So that's how we explore code when you are reading a large code bases. Again, this helps a lot. The shortcuts are Alt left arrow to go back, Alt right arrow to go forward. These shortcuts are very should be very familiar if you use browsers, desktop browsers. If you go back, you use alt left arrow. If you go forward, you use alt right arrow. Okay. And I think we are mostly done with this editor part. Let me jump back to the slides so that the real editing stuff is coming right now. So again, I think most of you are all already familiar with these shortcuts, but I just want to emphasize, like, all of us are on the same ground here. So just follow me here. You know how to use left arrow and right arrow. I don't need to explain that. Basically what it does is you can see the short animation here. So when I type right arrow, it moves me to the forward, and when I type the left arrow, it moves me to the backward direction. Basically arrows will set the direction for your cursor to move. Okay. Now if you use control, again the video has changed, so just carefully observe it. When I type control right arrow, look at the cursor. It is jumping one word at a time. So control is basically making your navigation faster by one word at a time. So always try to use control and then hitting arrows, not just simply hitting arrows. So when you use control, it makes your navigation very fast. So control left arrow, move one word at it towards the right, one word at a time. If you do control left arrow, it moves the word, the cursor one word towards the left. Okay, most likely nothing new here as well. Now, it surprises me a lot because many people don't know how to use home and end keys. Because if you have to move to the starting of the line, you could simply hit home. Home will bring to the starting of the line, and end will bring to the ending of the line. It's even faster than control, right? Again, most of you might be already familiar with it, but just calling it out here. Now, the other thing is we have shift. Up until now, control or arrow keys only navigate to the cursor, but it doesn't select anything. So that's where shift come into picture. When you do shift, it will not only shift arrow keys are for navigation, shift is for selection. So when you do that, shift left arrow, right arrow, it basically selects the text. So observe here, like if I do shift left arrow, it selects it. And then shift right arrow will select. Again, because I am just holding arrow key here, it is going one character at a time. It is selecting the text one character at a time. Okay. Again, if you are already familiar with it, awesome. Some of the interesting stuff is going to come now. So again, how do you delete text? I see many people, even within corporate world, where in order to delete text, you keep hitting backspace repeatedly or delete key repeatedly, right? Delete key is meant for deleting a character that is right next to the cursor. Okay, if you do delete, you're deleting character right next to the cursor. If you hit backspace, you're deleting a character before the cursor. Again, do not do single character edits or single character navigations. That will absolutely slow you down. Now, again, I think you already know control A, which will select the entire text, right? Again, none of these shortcuts are anything new to you or anything special to VS Code. All of these shortcuts actually work for every text editor that you have used till now, except Vim and Emacs. But yeah, I'm not going to talk about these right now because they are specific to VS Code, but let me quickly jump over the exercises I prepared so that to make this demonstration more practical. So let me just jump into the exercises. So I have opened a folder which I created, which has got these exercises here. So right now we are dealing with basic editing walkthrough. That's the name of the slide, basic editing, right? So I have created small text here. So here what I'm showing you is basically the videos that you just saw. Like I'm hitting, let me turn on the screencast mode here. So if I do right arrow, I'm going right and left, right? And then if I hold control, like I said, control will boost the navigation. It basically speed up the navigation, right? If I hold control and if I do right arrow, I'm jumping across the word, which is way faster than moving with one character at a time. Okay. Similarly, I can go back by pressing back, control back. Okay. So the takeaway is, don't use the absolute normal one character keys. Instead, combine them with control key to make the navigation faster. Now, similarly, you can use home key and end key. Home key, end key makes it so much faster. I can move to the end of the line and I can move to the beginning of the line by pressing home. Okay. Now, similarly, if you, again, selecting text, you can hold shift and then select text, right? Nothing new. Now, look at what happens if I combine control and shift. Remember, control is for making your cursor move faster. Shift is for selecting text. Now, when I combine them, control, shift, and then left arrow, right arrow, the beauty is basically it will start selecting text by word. So much faster, right? So you have to get used to this way of working with text. Similarly, if you have to select backward, basically control shift and then you press left arrow. Okay. So always when you're editing text, you want to modify, you want to select something, always use control shift followed by other arrow keys. Okay. And then this is another thing that I find it's quite interesting, which is if you press delete like this, you are editing each character at a time, which is almost a waste of time. Instead, what you can do is combine that with control, because remember, control will make your navigation faster. So if I hit control and then delete, it deletes the text by word. So much faster, right? Like this. Similarly, if I hold control and hit backspace, the same holds true, just that instead of deleting one character, control is making you delete multiple words at a time. So I'm deleting the text backward. So I promise you, once you get used to these shortcuts, your navigation becomes so much faster. In fact, you get surprised how efficient you become the more you keep using this. I think that covers this part. Again, just a small demonstration. You know how to use Control here to select the entire text. Okay, so up until now, I just taught you. Probably most of you people are already bored by this shortcuts, because some of you are already familiar with this. But trust me, more interesting stuff is going to come right now. Yes, let me just quickly go over this as well, which makes your life so much easy. Usually, in order to select the entire line, right? Okay, if you want to select the entire line, you hit home and then you hold shift and then you hit end. It selects the entire line, because I moved from characters to words, and then now I'm moving to lines. So I'm doing operations at a line level, right? So I can do delete. Okay. Now, one other thing is, okay, with specific to VS Code, up until now we just saw shortcuts which are also available in other editors, but this, from now on, whatever I am talking is specific to VS Code. In order to delete a line, you do not have to select the line. So let's say, forget about delete. If you want to copy a line, generally what you do is you select the line, you hit Control C, and you come to the end and you paste it by pressing Control V, right? You don't have to do the selection. Luckily, VS Code optimizes line-based operations. If you do not select anything in this line, and if you press Control C, without selecting anything. And if you press Control C, the copy operation applies to the entire line, which eliminates that additional selection of line, right? So you come here and then you simply paste it. Okay. Similarly, generally, if you do not select anything in the line, and then if you press Control X, you people know when you press Control X, you cut the word, cut the selected text. But here I haven't selected anything. So when I press Control X, what happens is it is deleting the entire line like this. So basically, I'm eliminating the selection process here. Okay, and I'll come back to one other shortcut later, but let's move on to um, uh, the other section, which is basically the multiple cursors, which is what I wanted to spend most of my time here. I'm not sure how many of you are already familiar with multiple cursors, but let me give you a slight intro to it. Imagine with one cursor, you are able to do almost like 3 operations, right? You are able to navigate by moving the cursor. You are able to delete by pressing backspace or delete, and you are able to select. With just one cursor, you are able to do 3 things. Now imagine you having like multiple cursors in different places in the text. You can do all these 3 operations independently at each of those cursors. Now, this might sound complicated at first, but hear me out. So the first step to even use multiple cursors is how do you even create multiple cursors, right? Up until now, you just only saw me showing you one cursor. There is a way. So let's go over them step by step so that you can understand. Don't focus on the shortcut right away. Let's look at the text. Here, I wanted to select all the words the. There are like almost like 6 places where you see the word the, and you want to select them. And you want to basically change the word the to capital D, THE capitals. You have to write them in capital. Usually the way you have to do it without multiple cursors is you search for each word and you go there and you edit it, right? But you can do something like Control D. What that does is it will create a cursor exactly at the next occurrence of that particular word. So I start at this D, and then when I hit Control D here, the second D gets selected. If I again press Control D, the next D. So if you keep on pressing Control D, it creates multiple cursors. Okay. Now with this, what I can do is I can basically, since I have got cursors, and the other point I forgot to mention is it not only creates a cursor, but also it selects that word. If you observe carefully, since the words are already selected, I could have just press backspace, which would delete those occurrences, and then I would have typed capital D. Okay, so I'm calling this way of creating multiple cursors the search method, so that it's easy for us to refer later. Okay, this is one way in which you can create multiple cursors. Okay, but it's not the only way. Let's look at another way. Here, the first way is to find known word across the text. For that, we use Control D. We are calling it as search method. Now, if you go to the second method, right? So, for example, I have this paragraph, right? I want to indent it towards the right. The way you could do it is naively, you could hit tab on every line, which is again time consuming depending upon the size of the paragraph, right? So instead, what we can do is you can drag the cursor using something called as Control Alt down arrow. Again, don't worry too much about these shortcuts. You can refer to them in the PPT that I'm going to share. But let's call it a method. Call this method of creating cursors the drag method. The reason why we need this is there is no way you can create multiple cursors here using the search method, because there is nothing common here, right? So in such scenarios, you have to basically use this drag method to create cursors across the lines. Basically, you start at a column, and when you keep dragging the cursor using that Control Alt down arrow, it creates a cursor exactly down to the next row. Okay, this is one way. Basically, this is the second way. Now, let's look at the third way, which is you have a piece of text, right? And you don't want to drag. You don't, because you don't know how long, how many lines that text is running through, right? So the third way is you could select the text, right? And then you can press Control Shift I. Again, don't worry about the shortcuts. Let's call it select lines method. Okay, so things might complicate at this point, but trust me, we have a couple of exercises I'm gonna run through so that it makes it so much easier for you, and also know when to use what kind of method to create these multiple cursors. Just hear me out for now. So observe the video one more time. So I'm selecting the text and then pressing Control Shift I. Shift Alt I, not Control. I should have changed it. It should be Shift Alt I. I'll correct it later. So once you do that, if you observe, basically you see the cursor across all the end line ends. Okay, this is the third way. Okay, there is one other last way. So hear me out. This time I want to select all the commas within the text, right? All the commas. I could have used Control D because it is very similar to D, right? I could have pressed Control D, Control D, Control D, Control D. Now the problem with Control D is it works nicely if the text that you want to change is small, like there are only like few lines, you can repeatedly press Control D. But if you want to change comma in the entire file, you pressing Control D repeatedly doesn't make any sense, right? So in those scenarios, you use this method called find all method. Again, these are the names that you won't find in the documentation. I just naming it, calling it that way so that it is easy for us to refer later. Okay. So here what we do is we press Control F to bring the find dialog. And then I type the word that I am trying to find, here in this case, comma, which will highlight all of them. And then what I do is hit Alt Enter. When I do Alt Enter, it will create cursors in those at those words across the entire file. Okay, I know it's kind of overwhelming, but remember we have four methods. One is the search method, where you find you create cursors based on a known word, and we have the drag method, where you create multiple cursors across a column, and then you have the third method, which is select the lines, in which case it creates the cursor to the end of the lines. And there's the fourth method, which will basically find all the occurrences within a file and create multiple cursors there. Do anybody need any break? Let me know. Okay, so let's jump into the exercises part. That will make these things clear and also help you understand how powerful these primitive operations are, right? So let's jump into multiple cursors walkthrough. Again, I created a section, a folder here to demonstrate what a multiple cursors can do, right? So let's explore this text. And then I want to change D to capital D, right? Like I said, we can use the first method, which is the search method, right? I find the letter D occurring here, right? So I keep pressing Control D. Looks like there are only 3 occurrences here, and I could simply, remember, it creates a cursor and also selects that particular word. So this blue thing that you're seeing is basically the text is already selected. Okay, the orange is basically showing when you find things, the word gets highlighted with orange. Orange meaning it's showing the occurrence. Whereas here the word is already selected. Since it is selected, I can just press backspace, which deletes the old word, and then it still retains the cursor there. Now I can simply type whatever I feel like. In this case, I'm changing the text to capital D. Okay. Now let's see how can you use this practically, right? So you might be editing some code, right? Again, don't worry about what this code is doing, but let's I just picked up this code from somewhere. So all I'm trying to do is I want to rename the variable left with left child, replace the word left to left child. Naively, if we have to do it, one way of doing it is using Control F and replace. That can be done, but having it done visually makes a lot more sense. You inadvertently don't replace some other unknown text, right? So I again, whenever you want to select a word, don't drag it, simply double click it. Just make it a practice. Just double click words to select them. Since left is selected, again, I'm not following the questions, so please stop me and ask me any questions if you have. Okay, so the left word is selected here, so I'm going to press Control D. The second occurrence is selected, and then Control D. The line number 21 left is selected, and again Control D, Control D. Remember, all the words, it not only created cursor but also selected those words, right? So I cannot simply type. First I need to get rid of that selection. All I want is the cursor, not the selection, right? For that, you just hit right arrow so that it still retains the cursors, but the selection will be gone. Now I can simply type child. So left will be renamed to left child. Just for the sake of it, I could also rename right to right child. Does it make sense? So these are the scenarios where Control D comes into picture, which I'm again calling it as a search method. Now let's move on. This is about how do you use a drag, right? You have a piece of text here. Now you want to indent. If you look at it, it's a bullet point, and then it is the paragraph is starting. Now you want to indent this whole from starting from here to here. One way is you could use your mouse and then hit tab. Not a bad idea, because again, I'm not discouraging you to use mouse, just that you use mouse effectively whenever needed. That can be done. The other way is, let's try to exercise this drag method of creating cursors, right? So instead of, but don't do this. This is absolutely a waste of time, right? So instead of that, Control Alt down arrow will create the multiple cursors using the drag method. So I'm creating it, and then I'm hitting tab. Okay, so this is another use for creating multiple cursors. I cannot use Control D here, right? Because none of these words are same for me to search and then create cursors. So only way I can do it is by dragging the cursor. Okay, let's see how this can be used in code. So I'm going to the next section, right? So here, if you look at, there is a small for loop which has got a code. I commented it out. But the point here is, if you look at the indentation, right, the flower, the curly brace, it didn't start right beneath the letter F. It went, basically the indentation has gone bad by 2 columns, right? One way is, naively people would go here and then they do this, right? It's again, your job gets done but very inefficient, right? Instead, what we can do is, it would be awesome if we can create multiple cursors here. So I'll use the drag method to drag the cursors. Again, I cannot use search here because I don't have any words here, so I'm using drag method and then creating the cursors and then doing delete. Okay, it fixes the code and makes my life so easy when editing text. Okay, now let's move on. Let me show you how we can use the third approach, which is creating cursors, right? Like how do you select text and things like that. Now, you again here what I'm trying to do here is with this exercise, I want to clean up the line numbers. I want to remove the line numbers first of all, right? The problem with, I cannot use control D because the words are not common, the words are not repeating. So the intent is remove the number line altogether in front of the country names. Unfortunately, what happens here is, like, I have got like almost like 200 or 300 country names here. So I cannot, firstly I cannot use search method. Secondly, I cannot use a drag method because it makes it so much hard for me to drag all the way down, and I do not know what I'm doing, right? So this is where the third method of selecting lines come into picture. So what I do is I try to select the text by hitting shift page down. Basically it will select the entire text, and then I press shift alt I, which will put my cursors back to the end of each line. Okay, so if you see here, it is putting the cursors to the end of each line. Now this is where you have to pay a little more attention. When you create multiple cursors, each cursor has its own clipboard or its own memory. So whatever operations that you do, like control C, control V, whatever, the each cursor will store its own word. It's almost like you applying that command to each of those cursors, right? So what I'm trying to say here is each of these cursors are independent. Okay, now on those lines, when you move with left arrows, again my intent here is to clear out the number line, right? I cannot simply move one character at a time and then move it, right? The problem here is not all of the country names are of the same length, if you observe carefully. Instead, what I have to do is I have to efficiently use keyboard such a way that all cursors will be navigated in a uniform way. So my intent here is bring all those cursors to the beginning of the line so that I can delete those numbers, right? So in order to bring those cursors all to the beginning of the line, do not use left arrows because they won't help you. As I said, the country names are, some of the country names are longer and some of them are shorter. Instead, what we can do is hit home button. When you do hit home, you're putting all of the cursors to the front of the line, each line, right? Now, since you are at the beginning of the line, do not again use delete key. What happens if I do delete? The problem with delete is when I do delete, it only deletes one character, which means if I do delete, it leaves out the other numbers, right? So again, you have to be slightly creative here to make sure you use a shortcut or a keyboard basic navigation keys that will apply for each of the cursor. So if you think about it, you could do control delete. Remember, like I said, when you do control delete, the delete applies to the entire word. It doesn't matter how long the word is. And like I said, since each cursor works independently, that control delete applies to each of those cursors. So let me hit control delete and watch out what happens. The entire number line is gone. So the more you practice these things, they become almost second nature to you, and you don't even feel like you're finding how to even edit text. It comes so much natural to you. Hope you understood what I'm trying to say here. Creating cursors is one task, and being able to creatively use those cursors is another task. The second task, it comes through practice, but not that hard. Again, I hope we covered three of the ways in which we create cursors and whatnot. Let's just look at the fourth way, which is finding all the occurrences and then replacing them. Here, if you see, I have a CSV file, comma separated file, where all the fields are separated by commas, right? So intent here is to replace all of the commas with the pipe symbol. Pipe symbol, I mean this guy. right? So I cannot use Control D, I mean the search way of doing it, because it is so much very tedious. I have to do Control D like many times. It's super time consuming, right? Nor I cannot use drag, because if I create drag, how do I delete or edit replace comma with pipe? So even the second method, the drag method, is also ruled out. Now I cannot probably do Control Shift I, the third method, which is select lines and then creating back arrows. Again, I do not know. Creating cursors is easy here, but again, you won't be able to effectively use those cursors uniformly to remove these things, right? So this is where the our fourth method come in, right? So basically, you find comma using Control F, right? So I hit Control F, it brought me the find thing, and then comma. And then when I hit Alt Enter, look what happens. It created cursors everywhere within the file. Okay, you could have asked me like, what if I don't want to select some of those commas, right? Yes. Again, there is no silver bullet here. So some of those cases have to be dealt separately. But by and large, this is how you do it. Whenever you want to edit the entire text and replace anything in the entire file, this is the best approach. So now that I have got multiple cursors created across every comma, I can simply delete it and then I put a pipe symbol. It's that easy. Again, to remove these cursors, you just simply type escape. So again, all multiple cursors will be gone and you will be left with a single cursor. Okay. I hope you are still with me and making sense to you. Let me know. Can someone stop me if anybody has any questions?
Vinil, we have reached the almost 90% of the session time.
Okay, sir. Let me quickly summarize then. I think we are almost there. Yeah. Sure.
I think we can conclude in another 10 minutes.
Sure, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's let's move on then. So for you, let me show you another example, right? So you have this text, month names and the number of days. You want to convert this text into a string of array string, right? So let me quickly do it that way. Maybe I'll leave this to as an exercise so you guys can follow it. Just follow the methods, the 4 methods. Try as best as you can to get to this state. Similarly, you have a class and you have a fields and you want to add private, right? The easiest way is drag it and then add private. It's that simple. Okay. And then let's look at the third example, right? I have a couple of lines here which has words and then the URL. Words and then the URL. I want to convert this thing into this hyperlinks. So try to do it using multiple cursors again here. The hint here is you could find, let me show this so that it will helpful to you. So I just created multiple cursors across all of those and then hit end. It selected all of them. I cut it and then come to the front and then I start editing. href equal to, and then I put it there. It's that simple. Okay, practice it. You'll understand. I think that's about it. So I'm gonna upload these exercises again to GitHub so that you can practice. But let's move on with the presentation. So till now, these are all built into VS Code, so you're good there. But sometimes what happens is some of the functionality may not be available with VS Code. That's when the extensions come into picture. So this is the button where you click and then you install any new extensions, any extensions that you want. Again, what extensions that you need is already I kept them in GitHub, so you can easily refer to that. But I'm going to show you some of the extensions that I have here, so that you can see how effective they are. So you have a bunch of country names, right? You want to add numbers in front of it, 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot, like that, right? So you select them, or you can use whatever way you want. And then again, Control Shift P. When I do Control Shift P, if you have the extension called text pastry, you will get this option. And if I click that, it will create numbers across those selected lines. So you don't have to do individually. Again, there is a CSV extension that you can install from Marketplace. If you install it, it makes reading CSV files so much easier. It color codes everything, so it looks so much easier to your eyes. Again, there is this alignment extension. If you look at here, there are a bunch of lines. I want these values to be aligned in a single row, single column, to look nicer. So I'm selecting that text, and then I'm creating multiple cursors. Okay. And then I'm bringing those cursors to the front of those words. Once I have those, I'm going to hit Command Shift P and then type align. Look what happens. When I hit enter, it will align all those lines. So the code looks much more beautiful. This is basically simple format. Probably I'll add the shortcut here and you guys can follow. And one small thing is, sometimes you have fields for which you want to rename the names. Here it's like all small case with underscore. You want to name it into camel case, right? Again, this functionality, you cannot get it from VS Code. You have to have an extension. All you have to do is, again, Control Shift P and then camel. So once you do that, it will automatically change the name to camel casing. Okay. So basically case conversion, you can do that. And sometimes you want to have, if you have any PDFs, right? PDFs are by default cannot be opened in VS Code, but with an extension, you can have, you can open PDFs right within VS Code. Okay, so there are these extensions. Again, like I said, all of my extensions list, as well as my settings, which I have configured in my VS Code, I'm going to upload them to, I think I already uploaded them to GitHub. So you can find those references here. So I created this repository, GVP COE sessions 2024. There you can actually find all the resources. And now that we are at references, so I would suggest you to highly follow this YouTube Shorts channel. It is created by the VS Code team in Microsoft. Basically, they post a lot of small videos to explain any new features or whatnot. In fact, that's how I kind of learned a lot of these things. And finally, you could refer to docs as well. I think most likely you will get an answer from Stack Overflow at any point in time. I think we are at the end of the presentation. So again, thank you so much for everyone for coming here and attending the session. And I'm very happy to interact with you guys. Feel free to, again, post any questions you have.